Everybody, Sean from Movie Assault here, and it is time for the answer portion of my question and answer video. When I did my 300 subscribers giveaway, when I had people submit entries, I asked them to optionally submit a question for the Q&A video, and I was very surprised. I got a lot of response and a lot of good questions, so I'm going to get right into them. I'll tell you who asked the question, read the question, and then hopefully give you a coherent answer. I did take some notes for some of these just because I wanted to keep myself on track, and I didn't want to sit here for an hour and a half trying to come up with an answer for each one, so we'll just get right into it. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm just checking my notes on my answer, just to keep myself somewhat situated. Raptor Rivera asked, what are your thoughts on the landscape of physical media in 2023? This one is pretty easy to answer. It's pretty obvious that in the retail landscape, things are getting smaller. Target has virtually eliminated their physical media section. Best Buy is trending that way. Walmart, I haven't been to in a while, but it seems to be getting smaller in at least some of the stores that I've been in. It's still probably the biggest of those three, but not by much. And I think things are trending towards, I hate to say it, but mostly online sales, which kind of sucks because even though I buy a lot of stuff online, there are certain things that I prefer to pick up and buy in person. And, you know, sometimes you just like to go browse, and part of that impulse purchase is some of the fun of collecting physical media, just walking in and seeing, like, for example, I saw the horror punk and his brother went out and found the $5 steelbooks at Walmart, just stumbling upon those kind of deals, that kind of thing. I think it's going to stop, and mostly everything's going to be online. I don't think physical media is going to go away. I think as long as boutique labels exist and there's still a demand, you know, rather than printing 6 million of a title or whatever they used to do at the height of physical media, you know, labels may produce 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 copies of something, just to fill the void. But I really don't know. It really depends on the titles, but I think it's going to be sort of like vinyl. I think it's going to have a resurgence at some point. Streaming seems to have hit a wall of saturation, and people are noticing that when something disappears on streaming, it's either impossible to find or it's very inconvenient to find. And you know, if I want to watch, I don't know, the giant spider invasion, I've got it right here on Blu-ray. I don't really have to search for it on, you know, 16 different apps to find it. So I think it's, long story short, I think it's kind of depressing, but we will soldier on. Okay, Horror with Haas asked me, if I was making a movie, who would be my dream cast to have in it? This one I have to basically look at because I can't remember exactly who I wrote down, but it's really going to depend on what the subject matter of the movie would be. So it's really a hard one to answer. But no matter what it is, I'd probably find a role for Pedro Pascal and Nicolas Cage, just because. And I don't even really know what my fascination with Nicolas Cage is. I think it's just because I like seeing, he puts out so many movies, I just like seeing which Nicolas Cage shows up, whether it's the incredibly dedicated to his performance version, like in Mandy or Pig or The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, or something like Primal, where he's phoning it in. And to be fair, most of the time he's not phoning it in. But I don't know, Pedro Pascal and Nicolas Cage, I think, would be hilarious to be in a movie, or at least work with them. And I know they both work together in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I just thought they were hilarious together, but I really don't know. It really would depend on the subject of what I was casting. Every time somebody asks me who my favorite actor is, I always go Christopher Walken, and I don't even know why, because I can't even point to one performance of his that I think is like the greatest ever. I liked him in The Dead Zone, but I always think Christopher Walken first. I'm not sure why. All right, Hobbs Horror asked a couple of questions. First was, or actually asked me one question. What's my favorite Hammer horror film? That's actually a really good question, but it didn't take me too long to pick an answer, and the answer would be The Curse of Frankenstein with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. When I was a kid, that's just the one that I always hoped would be on. If there was going to be a Frankenstein movie on, that was always the one that I wanted to see. I don't even know why. Maybe because it was in color versus black and white, and I preferred that when I was a kid. I don't know, but I've always liked that movie, and when I think Hammer horror, that's the first movie I think of, just because I've liked it since I was a little kid. Guillaume Barnaby, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, asked, do you think that Kathleen Kennedy will continue her reign over Star Wars for long? This is I'm not very good at analyzing business. I'm terrible at making business decision type questions or answering business type questions, because I have no idea what goes on in the heads of people who have millions and billions of dollars to play with and what they're thinking. And, if I was making a movie like the Batgirl movie, for example, would I shelve it to save money on taxes like they recently did for the HBO Discovery or whatever that's going to be called? That makes no sense to me. So all I can say is Kathleen Kennedy has made some stupid decisions with Star Wars. Just today, they shelved 2 more Star Wars projects. But the Star Wars as a whole has kind of been mismanaged over the long run, and it's not just been Kathleen Kennedy. I'm not one of these Disney haters where I hate Disney, what Disney has done to Star Wars. Star Wars has been pretty hit and miss ever since the first 3 movies. After that, you've got things like the Ewok movies and random cartoons with C-3PO and the Star Wars Holiday Special. You've got a whole bunch of stuff that's crappy about Star Wars and always has been. And you've got the good things, like at least the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. I haven't started watching the third. Andor, what I've seen of that so far has been really good. Obi-Wan Kenobi, some people hate it, some people loved it. I liked it. I don't know. So I think with anything with as much breadth as Star Wars has had over the years, you're going to find people who dislike some of it, some people who dislike most of it. But Kathleen Kennedy specifically, I have no idea. She's been a successful producer for a long time, and she's produced a lot of things other than Star Wars. I don't have any personal vendetta against her one way or the other. Mr. Mustard asked, how is my collection organized? Alphabetically, by genre, or another way? Actually, it is by format. I have my 4Ks up here alphabetically. They go to here, and then everything else is alphabetical Blu-ray. Over here, which you can't see, I've got compilation discs, sets that have more than one movie, and I have those alphabetically by the first movie that's listed. Or if it's like these, like this one is 4 film favorites, I just put it under 4. And this one is 4 film shark collection, it's next. That's it. I don't really get into arranging by studio or arranging by label or genre or anything like that, because I would never be able to find anything. And I don't have a huge collection. I mean, it takes up more than the camera can bring in, but it's just 3 shelves worth right here. It's not ridiculous like some people have. So my DVD collection is actually in another room. It's in a shelf, and it's a mess right now. It's not even alphabetized. It's just a complete mess. I even have some DVDs up here that you can't see. My DVD collection is just a total mess, because I don't watch DVDs very often, even though I keep buying some. Fink Studios asked me, my question is, if you could go back in time to see any movie again for the first time in a theater, what would you want to see? That's a really good question. This one I had to think about a little bit. My first inclination is to say Jaws, because I'd like to see it without my mom covering my face every time something remotely bloody happened on screen. I was 8 years old when I saw Jaws for the first time at a drive-in, and I sat between my mom and dad in the front seat of a car. That's back when you had bench seats in the front of a car. And she covered my eyes like every 5 seconds, and it felt like I didn't even see the movie. I went to school the next day, or whenever the next time I went to school after that was. I can't remember if I saw it in the summer or not. And I was all excited. Hey, I saw Jaws. And people were saying, oh, how about when that leg went down in the water? And how about when that guy got bit in half? And I'm like, I didn't see any of that. So I'd love to go back and take a look at Jaws in the theater, and kind of have a redo of that. But if you're asking specifically about me reliving or re-experiencing a movie for the first time, and sort of that in awe type of experience, it would have to be Star Wars back in '77 when my aunt took me. There was a theater locally called the Columbia that burned down like 2 years later, 3 years later, after I saw Star Wars. But I believe it was a 70 millimeter projection. I'm not sure. The screen was huge, but I just remember being totally captivated by that movie. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Just was totally in awe of it. And I remember every time I watched Star Wars since then, when they go into the trench, and there's the one scene where the camera goes into the trench and kind of moves along, I thought it was as good as 3D. I thought I was right there. It was amazing. I was 9 years old, and I've never had an experience like that in a theater before or since. It was just completely blew me away. Bumpy Jonas asked me, what movie have you purchased the most? Upgraded format, new edition, etc. That would have to be Star Wars. Star Wars seems to be my answer for everything. I have the original edition and the special edition. I have 2 DVD copies on VHS. Well, I have the original and special edition on VHS. I have 2 DVD copies. One is the special edition, and the other one has the special edition and the original edition included in a non-anamorphic format. I've got 3 Blu-ray copies, and one of those is a despecialized version, which is like a bootleg, but it's the original versions before the special Lucas hacked up versions. And then I've got it on 4K Ultra HD as well. So probably Star Wars. Running close second would be Halloween. I've got 2 DVD copies of that, 2 Blu-ray copies of it. I think 2 4K copies of it. One is the Lionsgate, and one is the Shout Factory, Scream Factory. And then the other one would be Jaws. I had that on VHS. I have that on DVD. I have that on Blu-ray. And I have 2 copies of the Blu-ray because I have a digibook and a regular copy. And then I have the 4K Steelbook. So yeah, Star Wars, Halloween, then Jaws. Miranda's Movie Madness, everybody knows her. She asked me a couple of questions. She asked me, how long have I been collecting and what got you into it? I guess it really depends on your definition of collecting. I started recording movies from the TV on VHS back in the 80s, and that was before you really could buy movies in the store. So when I would take movies off HBO or pay-per-views or whatever. And I had a fairly large collection. I don't know what I did with those tapes. I guess I ended up throwing them away at some point, but probably when I got into DVDs. But even when you could buy VHS in the store, I didn't have that many store-bought because I still had quite a bit recorded. It wasn't until DVD hit in 2000. I bought a PS2 as a DVD player, and that's when I started buying movies, and it didn't really kick into high gear until about 2003, 2004. I was in a relationship that ended, and I was single and I had a lot of money to spend. So I just started buying movies. And now I'm not single and I don't have a lot of money to spend, but I still buy movies. And if you're wondering, the first DVD I ever bought was Three Kings with George Clooney and Ice Cube. She also asked, what's the first movie I remember seeing in the theater? That I had to think about. It was actually The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams in 1974. I remember my mom taking me to see that. Thankfully, she didn't have to cover my eyes for that one because it's rated G. But I remember her giving me some advice that I think has shaped my movie-going experience ever since then, which was, it's not like TV where they can turn up the volume if you're talking, so be quiet. And I've always been somebody who can't stand when people talk in the movies ever since then. I don't remember the movie at all, though, which is funny. Do I have any guilty pleasure flicks that I can't live without? Probably too many to mention. I guess it really depends on my mood, what I'm into, what I'm feeling about, what I want to watch. But more often than not, it's probably going to be cheesy monster movies from the 70s or 80s, maybe the 60s. I'm a big Japanese kaiju fan. That's actually going to factor into another question that gets asked pretty quickly. But yeah, I'll watch Godzilla movies anytime. Kenny's Movie Palace asked me, what are your thoughts on TV show reboots and changing characters from the original series? It really depends on whether or not I'm invested or really care about the original series. So just as an example, The Munsters. I know that Rob Zombie recently came out with his reboot or whatever the hell you want to call it. That's not The Munsters to me. The Munsters will always be the original show with Fred Gwynne and Yvonne DiCarlo and Al Lewis. But The Addams Family, which was a show that I didn't have that much of an investment in when I was a kid, it was all right. It's been rebooted several times, with the 90s movies with Raul Julia and, I can't remember her name. That's going to kill me. Who played Morticia. Oh, well. But those two movies, I enjoyed those. I liked Wednesday, the Netflix reboot. So I don't know, maybe it's better not to be so invested in something because then you can let new things into your life. I don't know, but yeah, Munsters always is going to be the original series for me. I don't care how many times they reboot it, redo it, remake it. It's never going to be the Munsters to me. So I think there's always going to be an audience for anything. Somebody will like it. But I think if you've got something that most people are really into, this is obvious. If somebody remade Jaws, I think people would lose their minds because you're never going to top the original. But that doesn't mean somebody's not going to try in 10 years. Christus Regnat, I believe that's how that's pronounced. I apologize if it's not. Do you have any TV shows in your physical media collection? And if so, what? I do. I do not collect a lot of TV shows, but I do have some. I do have The Munsters. I do have WKRP in Cincinnati, Firefly, and The Invisible Man from the 1970s. I think it was from 74, 73, something like that. I have that on Blu-ray. I used to buy the seasons of The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, but I've since sold those or gotten rid of them just because I thought the series ended up being disappointing, especially Game of Thrones. That I at least finished, but Walking Dead, I'd never bothered going past season 7. And I think I bought up to season 6 on Blu-ray, but I've since gotten rid of those. And I think that's it. I can't think of any other TV shows. I am not a huge fan of collecting TV shows, mainly because I'm the type of person that does not get invested in TV shows as much as some people do. Like, I've mentioned The Munsters twice now, because that's a show I can pick up and I can watch any episode anytime, and it's always going to be funny. WKRP in Cincinnati, same thing. I can always pick that up and watch any episode, and it's going to be funny. Firefly is small, and it's a one season, and it's just it's not one of those things that would require a marathon to sit through all of the episodes. And The Invisible Man is again, I think it's one season, and it's not that many episodes. So I'm not the type of person that sits down and binges entire seasons. And I forgot to mention Ultraman. I do have Ultraman, the original series, and all of its offshoots that were released recently in Steelbook by Echo Bridge, I believe, or Mill Creek. I can't remember now, which is sad. But yeah, I haven't watched those, and that's the only thing that I've bought sight unseen, and that's mainly because of my my kaiju obsession. All right, last few questions here. I believe this is also from the same person. What are your thoughts on the future of movie theaters? I really think there's always going to be a place for movie theaters. I think there's something just primal about sitting in a dark room, watching a movie and sharing an experience with a bunch of strangers. And that may sound dirty, but I really think that there's something to that communal experience of sitting down and watching a movie together. I went to see Creed 3 last night. I saw it with a bunch of people I never met before, and there were people cheering, there were people clapping. Some people were just letting out in just whoops of joy and screams, and it was just hilarious. And you don't get that sitting at home, and not all movies lend themselves to that type of experience, but I think certain movies do. Creed 3 was one of them. Cocaine Bear, which I went to see last week, was the same type of thing. It was just something that movies gain, and that the experience is better when you see it with a bunch of people. I remember several times in the 80s seeing movies with a packed house, and those are some of my most favorite movie experiences. But I'm also one of those curmudgeonly people who can't stand when people talk in a theater when there's a quiet, contemplative drama or something going on. So I don't know. I really think, though, that people are drawn to that. I think it's part of our culture, too. If somebody wants to go on a date, it's dinner and a movie. So I always think that movie theaters will be around. Maybe not showing exclusive content. I think we are, since the pandemic, entering into an era where things are going to be coming home a lot quicker, even quicker than they are now, and they're coming home really fast. And I think there will be a time when things are shown simultaneously at home and in the theater at the same time. But just to give people that escape from their house, I think that theaters will always be around. So that was my long-winded answer of saying I think that, if anything, theaters will probably scale back a little bit at some point if box office numbers don't get better. And they seem to be improving lately, so hopefully that's not happening. But I think there'll always be a place for movie theaters. At least I hope so. And last question is, what was your favorite movie or movies when you were a kid? I was more hooked on a genre than one particular movie. I mentioned The Curse of Frankenstein earlier. That was one that I looked forward to seeing, but there was a show when I was a little kid. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and when I was a kid in the mid 70s, that's when I started watching movies by myself on TV. And on Saturday mornings, I would watch a show called what was it called? Superhost Saturday Mad Theater. It was hosted by a guy called Superhost, and it was from Cleveland. It was from Channel 43 in Cleveland. I lived in Western Pennsylvania at the time, but the cable company that we subscribed to, we had, I think, 12 channels back then. That was cable. They carried that, and every Saturday at 1 o'clock, he would show horror movies from the 50s and 60s, and I would be disappointed when what I called the man-sized monsters were on. So if there was like a movie about, creatures that were the size of people, I would be upset, not upset, but disappointed, because what I really like to see on Saturday afternoons were giant monsters destroying cities. And so I liked Godzilla and Rodan and Mothra and Gorgo and the Gargantuas and King Ghidorah, stuff like that. That's the stuff I liked. I became a huge fan of kaiju films, and to this day, they are my favorite thing to watch. If I was asked about what my guilty pleasure movies are. I love watching people in rubber suits mash down model buildings, and that's what I enjoyed as a kid. And I remember the first time I got to see one of those in the theater was Godzilla versus Megalon. It came out in theaters in '76, I think it was, and my dad took me to see it. And my dad was making fun of it the whole time through because it's admittedly a terrible movie. But I just loved it, and the experience of being able to see it in the theater, the same theater that I saw Star Wars in, actually, was just amazing. And even though it wasn't a great movie, I loved going to see Godzilla. And to this day, Godzilla versus Megalon is the Godzilla movie that I've seen most in theaters, because I saw it in the theater, and then I saw it a couple of times at the drive-in, playing in a double bill with Star Wars, of all movies, back in the '70s. So, yeah, giant monster movies, always going to be my favorite, even when I was a kid. And I also mentioned here, this is why I take notes, is I also liked the Ray Harryhausen monster movies like 20 Million Miles to Earth, Earth versus the Flying Saucer, Valley of the Guanji, stuff like that too, because they had, bigger than men size monsters. So they weren't always destroying buildings, but if that was in it, usually I was hooked. So that's the last question. I want to thank everybody for submitting questions. Depending on the response I get to this video, we'll see if I do another one. As always, thanks for making it this far into the video. If you are a subscriber, I probably don't say it enough, but thank you for being a subscriber, and I really appreciate everybody who takes the time to watch my videos and listen to me prattle on about movies and movie-related crap. I may not be the most well-spoken person, but everything I say comes from the heart. And I just love talking about movies, and I like learning stuff about movies. So, share your comments below, and maybe we'll do this again sometime. So thanks again for watching, everybody. Take it easy.